Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Live podcast and YouTube channel. Here I am being cheery MC for you in the always original and always homemade, on the spot, fresh ground introduction to the podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I am so happy to be here with you today to talk about, as I do 5 days a week, most weeks, I talk about tips, techniques, ideas, knowledge, understanding, and most of all, practice of how we can show up to our lives, right? Because the reality is that life happens in only one instant, and that is this instant, right? Life never happens in the future or the past. Life happens in the present moment, always, every single thing that happens. And so the things that we talk about in this podcast are ways, as I say, tips, tricks, philosophies, understandings, games, practices, jokes that we can use to come back to this present moment, which is the only moment there ever is. Because otherwise, when we're distracted from this present moment, when we're thinking about the things that are, maybe coming up in the future, and we're thinking about the things that have happened in whatever capacity we remember them in the past, when we're ruminating or we're worrying, basically, right, then we're not really here. But this is still where things happen. Things don't happen next week at the meeting that we're worried about. Things don't happen in the memory of past events. Things happen right now. Everything happens right now. And so that's what we talk about here, right? We talk about how, number one, how important it is to be in the present moment, to understand the grounding into the now. And how powerful that is, right? But then again, we also teach you how to do it. And that's the idea here. I shouldn't say I teach you how to do it because that's not fair. I do coach, right? I am a coach, a full-time professional coach, and I work with people. I have something like 20 clients right now currently who I work with at varying degrees of frequency and intensity and all that kind of stuff. And so I can teach you all of this. I am more than happy to teach you all of this. But in this podcast, what we do is we kind of just give you the basic understandings. That's really the fairness. And not to say I don't give you practices here. I do. But I don't necessarily teach you the practices. That would require coaching. So as always, every single one of these videos I do and send out in an email, there's always in the description of the video and the podcast, and also in the email that I sent out is a link. Okay, the link is called calendly.com/artburns chat with art, something like that. Anyway, if you click on that link, okay, it will drop you into the calendar, my personal calendar. You look at the calendar, find a day and a time that works for you. You click on the day. It'll show you the available times that I'm free. You click on whatever time also works for you. If you got to find another day, find another day. Finally, you find that time that works for you that also is free for me. You click on it. You put in your name, your email address, a couple of questions that I have in there, just really not important stuff, very simple stuff. Shouldn't say not important, but very simple, very quick, very easy. And then once you've done that, you have a 45-minute session, coaching session, booked with a person who coaches people all day, every day. And guess how much this costs you? Including the prep time that I have to put in, it costs you exactly $0 and 0 cents, right? And so if you're interested in just kind of, this is where we can determine. Number one, I can give you some very specific instructions. So if there's something in your life that, oh man, I can't stop fighting with people, or I can't stop getting road rage, or I can't stop eating, or I can't stop drinking, or whatever it is, right? I can give you actionable practices to use right then and there to help that thing, right? But also, this is where we determine whether this is a relationship that maybe might be worth pursuing for us, for you and for me. In terms of whether we feel like we vibe, And I mean, look, I've almost never been able to not figure out a financial thing. So please don't let money stop you from doing this. Okay, everything is negotiable. Everything can be figured out. Okay, the important thing is to get talking. All right. All right, so that was the 5.5 minute introduction here. So let's get into what we're talking about today, because I think I got some really important things to tell you today. So the other day on Sunday, my work week goes Wednesday to Sunday. So today's Wednesday, November 3rd, and I am recording this on my Monday. Okay, so this is the beginning of my week, right? And I spent the morning doing my reading, doing my meditation exercises, and now here I am recording an episode with about an hour before my first meeting here. So anyway, not sure why I told you all that. But anyway, on Sunday, I had a meeting with a client who was talking about fighting. All right. Now, this is a really interesting subject, and I wanted to kind of talk about this a bit. Okay. So, there is this sort of, there is a reality, right? That the world is sometimes not a safe place. Okay, that there are people out there in the world who are capable and willing to do violent acts. Right now, I've told this story a couple of times here. I just had to turn on the fan here. It gets a little warm here with the kids putting on the heat and stuff like that. But anyway, I personally have been I'm the victim of a violent crime. Okay, about 24 years ago or something. It's coming up to the date, actually, in about a month. I was going home one night really late, really drunk, like way drunker than anybody should ever be, when they rolled me over and the firemen smelled my breath. Apparently they all went, whoa, like 3 firemen, like, holy crap, how much did you drink? When a fireman is telling you you've had too much to drink, you know that you've had way too much to drink. But I don't remember that, because I was like in a state of near coma at that point. Like, I was in shock. I was coming in out of consciousness. But anyway, I had been walking home at about 4 o'clock in the morning after being out with the boys all night and just drinking. And a couple of guys, I've never admitted this before, because it's been such a source of shame, but due to the work I've done with my trauma, I'm no longer ashamed of it, I guess. But anyway, I'm willing to face the shame that they followed me right into my building. They were probably following me for a couple of blocks, saw me whip out my cash to buy a pack of cigarettes or something, and they just straight followed me into the building. Now, the door was broken. Like, they shouldn't have been able to get into the building, but they did. And of course, being as drunk as I was, I figured I could take these 2 guys, no problem. I'll just beat my way through this, and so turned out that I got stabbed in the leg, which punctured or ruptured sort of a sort of secondary branch of my artery, right? You do have arteries that run on the inside of your leg. You nick one of those, you got like a few minutes before you bleed out, right? But if you nick the outside, you could still bleed out, but you have it's a slower process. So I actually lost about 7 pints of blood, which is about half of the blood that's in your body. They beat me to a pulp, like literally beat me to a pulp. So anyway, I'm telling you all this to let you know that I am not somebody who believes, like, I don't believe that the universe is all peace and love. And, I know that there are people out there who are, capable and willing of committing horrible acts of violence. Okay. And yet, even in that situation, I am very reluctant to sort of promote or sort of endorse the idea of fighting. And I want to tell you why. Okay, there's specific reasons for this. Okay, now, number one, yes, well, first of all, the thing is that it's safety is a very relative term. Right. I mean, most people go their whole lives. I mean, do you know, I have my uncle, he's passed away now, but he was a 20-year cop in New York City, became a detective, like legit NYPD guy. Right. And he once told me that it's something like 90% of cops in New York City retire after 20 years and never take their gun out of their holster while they're on duty. you know? And so we get this idea that it's such a violent place, but and yes, there are certain things that happen that are incredibly violent, but it's a question of how accurate that all is, right? And in a lot of ways, it's not accurate, right? And this, of course, is in part, owing to, the violence that we see on TV and the things that the news chooses to show us, right? The news is showing us what they want to show us, right? So it's not that this is the comprehensive reporting of every single thing that happened in the world today. No news program could do that, right? So they're picking and choosing what they're showing us. And most of that stuff is the stuff that's violent and scary. And because, they are paid by their advertisers, and their advertisers want you to buy stuff. And the best way to get you to buy something is to put you in a state of fear. Okay. That's how it works. Okay. So look, that's a question for a different time, right? Or we can get into that discussion if you want to. But the biological imperative for us as human beings is to feel safe. Okay. That's everything. Okay. And I'm actually going to cover that in the next segment, that everything relies on our feeling safe, right? That's where we're able to connect to each other. That's where we're able to find our authenticity. That's where everything, again, if we're safe in the present moment, we are open to what is happening in the present moment. Okay. So feeling safe is the most important thing. But some of the things that we do in our society to make ourselves feel safe, or in the effort of making ourselves feel safe, might be counterintuitive, right? Because there's the cognitive understanding of safety, right? Like if I can buy a big gun, or I can get a big lock for my door, or like when we go into public spaces, we go through metal detectors, and we go through, we see cameras everywhere. We see big, armed policemen. Remember the first time I went to Europe and as a teenager, and I saw, guys, cops with machine guns at the airport. It was like, whoa, now all of this cognitively makes us feel safe, right? But the problem is that your cognitive, brain function is not the same as what your nervous system is picking up. This is what Stephen Porges, the author of the polyvagal theory, calls neuroception, right? That even though I might cognitively say, like, okay, if I have this gun, if I have this thing, if I have this alarm, this, whatever, big gates on my windows and stuff like that, cognitively that's making me feel better. But in a neuroception, it's actually making me feel scared, right? Because these things are not natural. They're not there for, they're not usual. They're not, it's scary, right? And so the thing is that my client, and I'm definitely going over on this segment, I'm sorry, but we'll make it up on the next one. What my client was talking about the other day is that, it's important for a man to be able to protect his family, right? And I get that. I really, really do. And I don't disagree with that. And despite the fact that I, took a really bad beating by two guys when I was completely incapacitated with alcohol, is no reflection from no reflection of the skills that I do have. Like if I have to rise up and engage in a physical, confrontation, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not saying that that's not something that is never going to happen in my life, right? But I am saying that the chances of that happening are extremely remote. Much more remote, as I said, than what the news will have me believe. Right? Or TV shows would have me believe, or movies that would have me believe. Once in a while at night, I like to look for some Netflix and just Netflix and chill, as they say. But there's nothing chill about any of this stuff on Netflix. It's all like violence and shooting and bombs and car crashes. And it's like, oh my gosh. Now, there's an old saying, right, that says, I would rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war, right? And that, I think, is a very telling sort of aspect of all this, right? Is that yeah, you want to be able to defend yourself by all means. Right? There's nothing wrong with being able to defend yourself. And like being that warrior but in the garden, right? Like that idea, like there's nothing wrong with learning the techniques, right? Whether that's a weapon of some sort, or that's a technique of like Tai Chi or kickboxing or straight up self-defense, like whatever it is, right? That's gonna be very a very sort of a potentially advantageous skill. Let's put it that way. Okay. But the question is, what is the intention behind that skill? Right. And here's the thing that I really want to say here, and we're going way over on this segment, so y'all gonna just have to forgive me. I hope it's okay. This might actually wind up being a 30-minute segment, the old style, but let's see what happens here. So the idea here of being the warrior in the garden, right? What does that mean? That means that you are someone who is, cultivating a beautiful life, let's say, right? Like you're cultivating, plants and flowers and beauty and growth, which requires a nurturing sense, right? But if you are a warrior in that position, you are ready to jump up and do what needs to be done, right? As opposed to being a gardener in the war, which is somebody who only knows how to, manage the garden and cultivate the garden and make beautiful things and create life and all that stuff. But then when push comes to shove, it's like, I don't know what to do, right? And so I get it. And again, I'm not telling anybody out there, don't learn how to defend yourself. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But what I am saying is that it's really important to check in with the intention of what we're doing, okay? For this reason, okay? If we learn, and one of the things that we were coming with the client that I was talking to the other day, and you know who you are, bud, what we were talking about essentially was this sort of concept of, okay, you could learn how to do, mixed martial arts, right? Which is essentially, people are going to, kind of teach you how to sort of, tap into your anger strength, right? And just hit something as hard as you can, right? And again, nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But as we talk about here in this podcast all the time, practice makes permanent, right? Like that's the whole concept of neuroplasticity and how we, how our minds form and our physical brains form through the activities that we do, right? And so if you're constantly out there, kind of, thinking about fighting and training yourself to fight and thinking that, that you're preparing for anybody to attack you, well, then what happens is the neuroplasticity in your brain and the process of your mind and nervous system, they start believing that, everything is a threat out there, right? Like it might be a disproportionate and unrealistic level of threat that we are feeling or experiencing because of the way that we're practicing our brain and forming our mind around this concept of fighting, right? There's a cliche saying about this that goes that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything starts to look like a nail, right? And so becoming the warrior in the garden, to me, right, means, okay, sure, learn these techniques. Take 6 months and learn the techniques, right? Or getting back to what I said about with my client, you could also look at something that is not necessarily only a fighting practice, right? So instead of mixed martial arts, perhaps you consider something like Tai Chi, right? Where Tai Chi is basically a form of meditation, right? But it's also a martial art. And it's a very sort of defensive martial art. So it's never about aggression and how hard I can hit something. It's about receiving a threat, essentially the same way we receive love. I mean, is the way Tai Chi works, right? But the idea, I've seen videos of like 90-year-old men literally throwing across the room a 20-something-year-old martial artist coming at him, right? And doing so with grace and ease, never breaking a sweat, right? And this is how Tai Chi works, right? And so the reason I say this is because Tai Chi never is about like, oh, look at somebody as a threat. It's about just live your life and you're ready for whatever comes, right? It's a very meditative, mindful view of it, right? And so what you're not doing is you're not creating this notion that, that the world is a dangerous place or more dangerous than it actually is, right? Because again, our perception, right? If we believe the world is a dangerous place, then our mind is going to respond to that danger and our emotions are going to respond to that danger. And remember, right? Your mind and your physical brain and your nervous system are constantly throughout your lifespan, from the very first breath you take to the very last breath you take on this earth, your brain, your mind, your nervous system, every cell in your body is being formed through the experiences of your life. Okay? So that means that if we're constantly thinking about how dangerous the world is and how many threats there are out there and how ready I need to be to fight, well, then that's the way your mind is going to see the world. And so you're not going, and that's not a realistic view, right? It's not. It's very biased. Okay. And so one of the things that I want to really kind of cover here, though, when it comes to this idea of defense and safety and fighting and all this other stuff that we're talking about here today, right, is that, I am a naturalist, right? I'm a Taoist at heart, right? We talk about a lot of Buddhist concepts here because it's a very conceptual philosophy, Buddhism is. Taoism, there's not a lot to say, right? Like, that's the thing about Taoism, that it's like, that's the Tao, right? Like, it's about a direct experience of the world, which essentially Buddhism is too, but Buddhism is using thousands and thousands and thousands of words to describe this direct experience of life. And the minute you try to describe it with words, you're no longer really a direct experience, right? That's what the Tao Te Ching, which is the kind of Tao Te Ting. I don't know how you pronounce it. Anyway, it's like sort of the sacred script or the philosophical script of Taoism, written by Lao Tzu, which is the one of the lines is that the Tao that can be described is not the true Tao, right? And so if you can describe it, you're already not really living it, right? And so the idea then is in Taoism, what we're looking at is not so much a cognitive understanding of things, but instead a sort of conjoining with the natural flow, right? Taoism is all about coming into your inner nature and allowing that inner nature to flow forth, knowing that you are the only one with that specific inner nature, right? And so the idea of Taoism is, or the idea of my mind that really goes towards Taoism. I read you the Tao of Pooh the other day, right? The story from the Tao of Pooh. So my mind is always going to go to that sort of naturalistic aspect, right? And what I mean by that is that when I think, and I've been thinking the last few days about this whole thing about learning to fight, right? And I think, and one of the, I always go back to like, okay, well, what do the rest of the animals of the world do, right? Because we can learn a lot about that, because that's the natural sort of way, that's the Tao, right? Like, that's how nature is doing it. Humans have sort of veered from that, and to our detriment in most cases, right? And so when I think about Taoism and I think about fighting, and certainly there's been warriors in China for 5,000 years. So it's not like there's nobody. And as I just said, Tai Chi is a martial art. It is something designed to help to survive a physical confrontation, right? There's no sort of ignorance of this. There's no sort of, unwillingness to accept what's actually happening, right? But in my estimation, in my view, I take this a step further and I see that, throughout the evolution of humans over, modern humans over the last 200,000 years and our predecessors for millions of years before that, right? We were never naturally at the top of any kind of food chain, right? We did not evolve and survive the way that we have because we have claws or sharp teeth or be able to run 40 miles an hour or being able to climb particularly well or having specifically really good eyesight or really good hearing or really good smell like the animals around us do, right? You look at predator animals, right? They have those attributes, right? Because they have their inner nature is that they are going to, that's their life. They need to kill other animals in order to eat. Humans are much closer to like a scavenger than that, right? Our anatomy is not like a tiger or a lion. Our anatomy is much more like a pig or an herbivore, or as I say, maybe something like a hyena, right? Where we're sort of a hybrid. Well, you can eat some meat, sure, but really, we're designed to eat mostly vegetables, right? The size of our intestines, the sharpness of our teeth, like the grinding action of our jaws. Tigers can't do that. Right? We do that. Horses do that. Giraffes do that. Pigs do that. Right? And so when I put it into that context, I realized that the things that have enabled human beings to become the top of the food chain was not this brawn. It was not power that enabled us to do that. It was two things that enabled us to do that. It was the ability to be cooperative and the ability to be cunning, right? Which is to say, to rest in our own inner nature and to figure out a way to trap an animal rather than some brute force of chasing an animal down and biting its neck. And, humans have never been able to do that, right? So if I look at what cooperation is, that sounds a little bit like compassion to me. Right? That sounds like, empathy and compassion and a way in which I have to connect to the larger group, right? Which is the attachment, which is the biological imperative that we have in this world. And it also sounds a lot like not only is it connection and compassion and sort of cooperation, but again, that cunning aspect, right? That sounds a lot like authenticity to me, right? Like knowing that like at some point we realize that no, I'm never going to be able to run as fast as that animal. Like that's not what's going to happen. So instead I have to play to my strength. And my strength is that I can sharpen this stone to look like to be in the shape of a spearhead, something that's sharp that's going to go into the animal. And then I can tie that to this big long stick and I can throw it. And look at that. I don't have to run as fast as the animal. So by coming into my authenticity and by attaching to the tribe around me, that's how I've risen to the top of the food chain. Never was it about having the biggest muscles or having the hardest punch or having the fastest kick. Never was it about that. Okay? So as you're considering maybe, what is defense? What is all this, right? It's worth considering some of this, right? And again, there's beautiful, I think Tai Chi is like the perfect solution here, right? Because Tai Chi it's a movement process, which is going to build beautiful integration. It's also a meditative process, which is going to also build integration and come up with lots of beautiful health benefits, right? And if you need it, it is a beautiful weapon to learn. Now, most areas, I mean, you can probably look and find at your local community center. There's probably somebody teaching Tai Chi for like $5 a class or something like that. Very, very powerfully recommend that you do it. I'm looking to get back into it. I did it for about 6 months or so, and I loved it. But then I moved, and I just haven't had the time. I'm looking to get back into it. So anybody out there in the Denver area who wants to do Tai Chi together, hit me up. And we can do that as a project. Or if you're outside the Denver area, you want to do a sort of simultaneous, like you do Tai Chi where you are, I'll do Tai Chi with where I am, and we can do that together too. I would love to do that with some of you. So let me know. Who wants to join the Tai Chi club? All right, everybody. Big, long, old school segment today. Hope you're all right with that. I'll do a couple of segments tomorrow because I definitely have some things to follow up on that today, especially that imperative for connection that we have. I can't wait to talk about that tomorrow. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. See you then.